Hello everybody, welcome back to another YouTube video. This is number 2, or I mean that looked like 4, but this is number 2 out of the series that I'm going to be coming up with here in the next few weeks. We are August, I think 20th, 2020, and summer is almost over and I have no idea where the summer went, like zero idea where the summer went. We are still in this coronavirus, like pandemic craziness. We have been working from home for the last, I think like what, 5 months or so. The company has been saying that they are trying to reopen sometime in September. However, I highly doubt that's gonna happen. Everyone's been kind of pushing their dates of reopening. So it'll probably be like January 2021 before anybody really goes back to the office. Or so that's what I think. I'm not too sure. And yeah, so this video I wanted to do, so I wrote down a few things on, like things that I want to touch upon. And one thing that I wanted to talk about is a lot of people don't really know my story, don't really know who I am or much about me other than I'm in oil and gas and I'm an engineer and I own 2 dogs and I'm married. Go over my story in the beginning of my series of next following videos so that you at least kind of have an understanding of who I am and whether or not you actually want to follow this channel or not. But yeah, so I grew up in Montreal, Canada, but I was actually born in San Andres in Colombia, which is a small island in the Caribbean that belongs to Colombia. And when I turned 4 years old, my mom decided to move to Canada. Now the reason we decided to move to Canada, not the US, is because we had some family members that lived in Montreal and they were like, come here, you'll have such a good future, your daughter can learn French, she can learn English, she can go to a really good school here, like, you know, if you sacrifice a little bit now at the beginning, you will have a way better life later on if you leave that island. So my mom, packed her bags, probably not a lot of money in her pocket, and bought her flights, and we moved to Canada with 2 luggages, and that was about it. We arrived to Montreal, like I said, and we lived with my uncle, his wife, and my 2 cousins for the first few months until we kind of got off the ground by ourselves and were able to rent a small apartment there in Montreal. A few months later, my grandmother moved from Colombia and came to live with us. Mainly because my mom needed help to raise me while trying to be a single mom, trying to learn a new language, be in a new country, have to go to work, all that stuff. And so my grandma decided, you know what, I'll move to Canada and I'll help you take care of your daughter. Which is why my grandmother is kind of like my second mom, or my first mom, because she was the mom role. My mom was more the dad role, and they just both took such good care of me. I owe them everything that I have, everything that I've been successful with in my life. I definitely owe both of them for raising me the way they have. And they're my biggest inspiration, both my mom and my grandmother. So I would love to one day have them on the channel and you guys meet them. But yeah, so growing up, I grew up in Montreal. My mom always had the mentality that she wanted to go back to school, mainly because she's a microbiologist by degree with a master's from Columbia, a university in Columbia. And when you come to Canada, or usually when you immigrate to another country, they'll never really validate your papers or your diploma. They'll say, this isn't, you can't really come here to Canada and think that you can be a microbiologist. You have to go back to school and prove to us that, your schooling is the same as ours. So, first of all, before she could do that, she had to learn French and she had to learn English. And she also needed money because going to school, we all know, costs a lot of money. So, through the age of about 5 to, I would say 11, I just saw my mom working really hard to work as I think she was like, I don't even know what she did. She worked at a telephone company where she would be picking up phones and just customer service stuff in Spanish, luckily. And while she was doing that, she was also learning French on the side on the weekends, and she went to like a school in French for immigrants where they would help you get off the ground and kind of integrate more into the Canadian culture. So she would go there, I think Monday to Friday, a few hours a day, and then she would go work. During this time, like I said, we lived in this small little shitty apartment that I still remember. And that's kind of like what life was like. It was very basic. I never missed anything in terms of, money was never an issue for me to have food on my table and things like that. But I definitely did, growing up, kind of notice that we were, less than middle class. Like I obviously could tell from where I lived compared to where my friends lived, or where, the cool stuff that they would get for their birthdays and things like that. And not to say that my mom and my grandmother didn't spoil me, because they did. And I think that's something that I'm really grateful for, is my mom always worked insanely hard to try to keep up with everybody around, so that I would never feel like I didn't have what other kids had. So she would work 10 times harder to try to get me all those things. And what's sad is, growing up, you don't see all of that. You're just like, well, I also want a bike for Christmas, and I also want this for my birthday. And you don't realize that clearly, like, my mom couldn't do what two parents could who were Canadian, who had a degree, and who could, earn a lot more money than her. But she always did a really good job at kind of trying to keep up, so that I didn't notice that there was a difference. However, I did notice at some point. And yeah, so kind of went through that. My mom was able to learn French and English, and she was able to go back to school. So when she went back to school, she wanted to go to York University, and she went back. So we had to move to Toronto, which is a city, it's about 6 hours away from Montreal. And we went there, and we lived with my uncle, his wife, 3 kids, and in the basement of the house, my other 2 cousins, their mom and dad. So we were about, I don't even know, maybe like 10, 12, adults with kids within one house that was kind of split into 2 with the basement and the top. And then my mom and I showed up, and my grandma would come also. So I grew up with a lot of family members living with us. It was just kind of normal. And I think this is very normal for Latino families, Arabs, Indians. We kind of all lived together to try to help each other out. And it was so much fun. Like I loved living with my cousins. We would all fight, we would play. So it was nice, because I'm an only child, and having, other kids my age was really fun. But also, it would also play in the back of my mind, like, why do we all live together? Like, again, why can't we afford a house on our own? And that was always kind of a theme throughout my life, is we never bought a house. I think the first house that we ever owned, my mother owned, was when I turned 15 years old, or 16 years old. That was the first time that we had keys to a house that belonged to us, and it wasn't us living with other people or kind of feeling like we were renting all the time. And it was amazing. But one thing that's funny is, growing up, I was always scared that I would never be able to afford to buy a house. It was like the one thing that scared me the most. It was always like, wow, $300,000 for a house. Like, I don't think I'll ever be able to afford such a thing. Like, maybe I'm just gonna have to rent the rest of my life, kind of like what I've done with my mom for all these years. And what's crazy is, like, now Tim and I own 6 houses, and it's crazy to think that by 30 years old, I have 6 houses, when, growing up till I was 15 or so, it was the first time I ever even owned a house, and I was always so scared of being able to purchase a home. So if anything, I just want to tell you guys that it really all comes down to what you want in life. And I knew from the very early age that I didn't want to just be average. I didn't want to just have a normal job, get married, and have kids, and never move, and kind of just be okay with minimum wage, and be okay with just an average salary. I always wanted more. And I think it stemmed from growing up as an immigrant and realizing that I didn't have that much. And I always wanted like 10 times more when I would grow up. I would always say, I want to be rich when I grow up. And I know it sounds crazy and probably not great, but I've never been ashamed of that. I've always chased financial freedom. And a lot of people would always say you know, money doesn't bring happiness. You know, look at all these rich people who are depressed and commit suicide and get divorced and all these things. And it's like, yeah, I mean, all the other poor people or middle class people also go through all that stuff, but it's only highlighted when you talk about money. It's like, oh, look at them, they're not happy. And I've never seen it like that. To me, yes, money does not bring you happiness. I agree 1000%. But financial freedom to me I know brings me happiness, because I've been able to somewhat do that since I graduated college. I've never been worried about using my debit card or my credit card or whatever and been worried that I can't pay for something. Well, that's a stress that I would never want. And that's you know, that stressless life of, I could afford that, I could afford that trip, let's book this, let's book that. That brings me happiness, because it's like you're at peace with what you can afford and the great activities and the trips and the stuff that you can get. And I mean, anybody who knows me knows I'm very frugal, so it's not that I wanted money to be buying and like blowing all this stuff. Like, if you look at my car, it's a 2013 BMW that cost me less than $20,000, and it took me years and years and years to buy. Prior to that car, I always had a Toyota Yaris that cost me $5,000, and even when I was making good money as an engineer, I never changed my car. So I don't think I've chased, you know, money in the sense that I've wanted money to show off and to buy nice luxurious cars or for luxury, but really more for just like a peace of mindset that I don't have to worry about all these other things. And that's why I've placed myself in a specific way in life, so that I don't have to worry about those things. And I think through my story, anybody can say, like, you don't need to have come from parents with money or come from a background where you had help. It's all up to you of how hard you want to work, how much you want to save and invest. And really, like I've always said, that life is really up to you and what you want to make out of it. And a lot of people say this, but I totally agree. Luck looks like a lot of hard work, one of the two. But I totally agree with that. Is sometimes we look into somebody's life and say, oh, they have 6 houses, they go on cruises, they do this, they do that. You know, and it's like, no, nobody really knows my story. Nobody knows Tim's story. Nobody knows how hard we work. We're usually the hardest workers in the room, and it's because we have a hustle inside and we have a goal that we want to get to eventually, and it's a driver for us. So that's something cool too, is throughout the story that I didn't even say, is I've been with Tim since we were in high school, and what's nice is we both had the same kind of drive. We both have the same goals. We both have the same end vision. And I think that's why we've lasted for 14 years, is because you need to find someone that has the same vision, that you want to be on the same path. The second people start deviating on different goals, that's where you start seeing issues, because one's going this way, one's going that way, whereas we've always walked together in that path. So I've been really lucky in that sense, that I've found someone that complemented me so well from the age of 16, and we've been able to grow together. And yeah, it's been really awesome. I cannot complain about that. But I just kind of want to cut it short, because I don't even know where this YouTube's going. But growing up, like I said, I saw my mom work so hard to get her degree, to get ahead in life after she moved to Canada with, you know, a 5-year-old. And she always really showed me that, look at all her hard work for us to come to Canada, to this country. And she always made it sound like, you better not screw this up. Like, you need to become someone so that my sacrifice was worth it. Because in the end, if she would have came, sacrificed, left her country, left her degree, went back to school, learned a new language, went back to schooling so she can get a degree to provide a better future for me, and then I ended up not doing anything with my life, that would have sucked. So I did always have that pressure of, hey, you need to be successful for us. And so that was kind of always something in the back of my mind, was I need to do something so that, you know, my mom's proud. And I hope she's proud. I mean, she tells me all the time she is, and I think I've shown her that, you know, her sacrifice was definitely worth it. I'm so thankful for everything she's done, and same thing for my grandmother. Quickly, because I do tend to talk a lot and deviate from my initial thought, and school was always drilled into my brain that I had to go to school, whatever that was, preferably a good profession, you know, quote unquote, medicine, dentistry, lawyer, etc., science, all that stuff. So yeah, I went through high school not really knowing what I wanted to do, and I don't blame anybody who's 13 to 17 years old to really figure out what they want to do in life. I had zero like thoughts of what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to go in science at some point because I really did like science and I liked math, and surprisingly that's something that I'm really good at. I'm insanely good with numbers, and I'm very good with science, with chemistry, with formulas, you name it. The things that I was not good at is writing, reading, speech, that kind of stuff. Horrible. Which I decided to go into chemical engineering when I got to university, and had no idea what chemical engineering was, didn't know anybody in it, like looking into the degree, you have no idea what a chemical engineer really does, and Google wasn't that friendly in terms of explaining it. And I think that's something that's really cool now with YouTube, is you can YouTube a lot of this stuff and see days in the life of a chemical engineer at a refinery plant, day in the life of a chemical engineer in oil and gas, day in the life of a civil engineer. And so that's what's cool about the younger generation, is you can really tap into social media and see what your life would be looking like. Well, as when I was growing up, it was just this big magical box of engineering, and I had no idea what I can get myself into or what that meant. And so yeah, chose chemical engineering out of the blue and loved it. It was the best degree ever. Like, I absolutely loved this degree. I had such good, 3.5 years of studying it. I enjoyed it. I loved it. And from there is when I decided to go into oil and gas as well. Zero idea that I would ever go into oil and gas. It was not anywhere in my future. It was nowhere near my goals. I had no idea what any of this stuff was, which is why I want to make a video after this on my career in oil and gas. I've made one like 3 years ago, and I think it needs an update to go over the last few years of my career thus far, because the one that I had on my channel, and I'll probably link it below if you want to go look it up, it was maybe like the first 3 years of my career. So I'm now at year 8. So I have a lot more to talk about and explain about my career. So yeah, that's kind of it. Immigrated to Canada, went to school, learned French, learned English, lived in Toronto, lived in Montreal. My mom always drilled in the back of my head that I had to go to school and that her sacrifice had to be worth it. And then I studied my butt off in college, had an amazing GPA. I think I finished with like 3.7 or so. Got into Schlumberger, got an internship with them, then got a full-time offer, and here I am now in Houston, 8 years later after graduating, and I have zero regrets. Like, I think this was the best path for me. It's crazy how life really works out at the end of the day. And I'm insanely thankful for the oil and gas industry. I'm insanely thankful for the company who hired me. And I'm insanely thankful for my mom and my grandmother who supported me through all of this. And I cannot miss Mr. Tim Taylor, my husband, who has been a huge part of my success and a huge part of why I was able to do really good in school, because he supported me through all the midterms, through all the studying, through all the long library dates that we would have, and to always just kind of push me to be the best version of myself, and never ever doubt me, and never question what I wanted to do, and just kind of always be super supportive. So shout out to all of you for helping me succeed this far. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Super random, but I felt like I kind of just had a lot on my heart, and especially for a lot of people who don't really know much about me, this is kind of like a really quick snapshot of my life. I'm sure I missed millions of things through there, but it's kind of a pretty good summary. So yeah, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to like, and don't forget to comment down below any sort of things that you want to talk about, questions, or I'll also leave my email below. I love answering people's questions, or if you email me about your career, or about any sort of thing that you're going through life. I usually I love answering people and giving my advice and tips. So Thank you guys again for tuning in, and I hope you guys like this series because I'm actually serious about coming up with one video a week. So if I don't, hold me accountable and send me a message and say, where the hell's your video? All right, have a good day, guys.